on racial equity in pharmacy practice. I'm Pat Aco. I am the diversity officer here at the college. I want to kick us off today with a few housekeeping notes. All participants, please mute and please remain on mute during the meeting to prevent any background. I want to let you know that today's meeting is being recorded, and so we can share it with other alumni who are not able to join us today. If you have any questions, make sure to put those questions in the chat function, and we'll try to get to the questions there. After we hear from our panelists, I will come back and share about diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that we have here at the college, and then allow time for you to ask questions of our panelists. But without further ado, at this time, I would like to introduce this evening's student moderator. Danae Eason is the president of the student chapter of the College of Psychiatric and Neurological Pharmacists and the Tribunal Diversity and Inclusion Committee co-chair. So with that, I'll turn it over to Danae.
Hey everyone, like Pat said, my name is Danae. Bree asked if I could give a brief intro on who I am and why I'm here today. So I am a third-year pharmacy student. I am a first generation in an extended family to graduate from college, let alone pharmacy school. So I find alumni advice inspiring and very helpful personally to see their journey from school to their practice. The reason I am personally passionate about D&I initiatives is because I am half Mexican on my mom's side, but I am extremely white presenting, as you can probably tell if you're seeing my video right now. Because of this, I find it integral to recognize the white privilege I have and to listen and empathize with minority populations on what they're going through and how I can help them reach an ultimate goal of equity and cultural competency. So that's all I have about me. And tonight we will hear from 5 panelists. The first one is Jerry Rucker, who was from the class of 1978. He is a retired pharmacist after 40 years of experience in numerous retail pharmacy settings and the West End Health Center. So is Jerry there and willing to talk to us?
I am.
Can you introduce yourself and kind of tell us about your background?
I sure will.
All
With
right,
great
thanks.
pride, I state that I am the oldest one here. I graduated from a HBHS in 1967. Now, I know most of you are familiar with HBCUs, but HBHS is a historic black high school. I received an associate degree in arts at UC in 1974. I received a Bachelor of Science degree from the College of Pharmacy in 1978. I served in the United States Army for 18 months. I served with the Ohio National Guard for 1 year. I've been a pharmacist for 40 years, and during this time, I've worked for several employees in the retail setting. I worked for the Kroger Company on 2 different time periods. I worked for the West End Health Center on 2 different time periods. I worked for Revco that became CVS on 2 different time periods. And during that 40-year period, I also worked for pharmacy corporations, including Walmart, Kmart, Rite Aid, and Walgreens. After I graduated, while I was going to school, I still maintained a position at the United States Postal Service for 11 years. After graduation, I joined several organizations, including the American Pharmaceutical Association, the National Pharmaceutical Association, the Ohio Pharmacists Association, and I'm a current member of the Veterans Apothecary Association of Cincinnati, known as VAC. I am a past president of the Cincinnati Pharmaceutical Association twice, from 1990 to 92, and from 2008 to 2010. I've also served as secretary and treasurer in the past for that organization. In 2004, under Dean Daniel Acosta, I was awarded one of the Distinguished Alumni Awards from the James L. Winkle College of Pharmacy. Currently, I assist the executor of the estate for Mr. Harold Waller, a pharmacist that finished in 1958, who has left funds for a scholarship that began being awarded to the students at JLW's College of Pharmacy in 2018. And I have served on the selection committee that tries to critique these applicants and then award the scholarship. I have one daughter and 3 grandchildren. And that's my history.
All right, thank you, Jerry. And next up, we have Margie Eaves, who is from the class of 1980. She is a retired pharmacist after 38 years of service with Walgreens.
Hello, everyone. Hello, thank you. For me, my pathway with pharmacy started in high school. I was filling out applications for a scholarship, and the last question was, what do you want to do? I wrote that I wanted to become a pharmacist and why. But my counselor, before he submitted my application, changed my answer to be that I wanted to be a social worker and because I could help people. I became angry and asked him, why did he do that? He said, UC Pharmacy School was difficult. His nephew was in the program and he failed. You cannot do it. This upsetting event gave me motivation for pharmacy. Attending the College of Pharmacy, I was dealing with and surviving events and issues that made me feel like an outcast or a novelty, but that provided me with resilience. Beginning of my second year, I lost my mother, and I ended up taking a lot of Black courses in Black studies. I got a new mindset. I became active in the college. Dean Glasser sent me and a classmate to Howard University for a SNAP regional meeting. We came back, and we started a chapter here. I also was one of 2 members of KE, 1 quarter, and so we kept that organization going. I participated in a study with the younger Dr. Hunter at that time on race and class in the community practice setting. When the college decided to have students participate in missions, I also volunteered to do that. I graduated in 1980. I decided to work for Walgreens because at that time, Walgreens was a company that went to neighborhoods that other stores wouldn't go into, and I was impressed by that. I did get a rejection letter stating that I was not needed in the Cincinnati area. But the next day, I got a letter from Walgreens corporate office that said they would like me to come to the Chicago metropolitan area. I was bused to Gary, Indiana, but there I received invaluable experience where I learned how to work with all kinds of people in various situations. That provided me with flexibility and sensitivity. The motivation, resilience, flexibility, and sensitivity made me the type of pharmacist that I wanted to be. I worked for Walgreens for 38 years. I was a pharmacy manager for 20 years and staff pharmacist for 18. Larry Klingenbeck, Dan Hine, Dick Barson were my pharmacy supervisors over the years, and each of them allowed me to be active in the College of Pharmacy and in community organizations by either covering me at work or providing me time off. At that time, Representative Mark Mallory presented me with accommodation from the state of Ohio for my service in the West End. In 1993, the West End Community Council gave me an Outstanding Community Service Award. In 1988, my store, Walgreens 271 of the West End, was awarded the Pharmacist of the Year Award in the Cincinnati District. In 2017, I was awarded the Dean Glasser Distinguished Alumni Award. Throughout my career, patient care was always first, providing excellent customer service. I promoted pharmacy as a profession. I encouraged people of color to become pharmacists, and I was a mentor to several students. Working with Dr. Robert E. Lee, Jerry, and others, we created the Task Force on Minorities, which is now the Council of Diversity. And also was a charter member of staff, as you know. Both of these organizations are still going strong. The fact that they have become a vital part of the college is confirmation to me that I did make a difference in pharmacy. And presently, I'm a member of VAC, NPHA, and also on the Council of Diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. I appreciate that. All right. The next person we have presenting today is Dr. Vernita Hawkins. who is from the class of '84. She is the Associate Director of Medical Excellence at UC Medical Affairs Biogen. So let's hear what she has to say.
Okay, thank you, Danae, and good evening, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here at my alma mater. Interesting, I'm just thinking this was a good exercise personally, just to reflect back, because I hadn't done it in a while, but I always wanted to be a pharmacist since I was about 15 years old. And what attracted me to it is I love science, particularly chemistry. I love people. And I was looking for something where I could pioneer things and just consistently be challenged with diverse experiences. And I think about career, and that's what I've always looked at. That's always been a pulse check for me in terms of what I did in my career. And I deliberately set out at that young age, just doing non-traditional things with my career, just using my skills in a different way. Yet always coming back to the foundation of pharmacy. So I selected University of Cincinnati. I wanted to be in an urban environment. And I was recruited by Mrs. Ruby Hill on the call. We used to actually correspond to each other. Mrs. Hill, I found some of the letters. Actually, I was moving and I found some of the letters I used to send to you because we didn't have email back then. And I used to correspond with her. So she was a very important part of recruiting me to the University of Cincinnati and supporting me there. And while I was there, I had the pleasure of meeting many of the people on the panel and they were also very inspirational to me. Got a really good training, but also it was a bit shy, so it helped me come out of my shell a bit by getting involved with SNAP. I was there when it was founded and actually became secretary and president of the chapter, inducted into Rho Chi. But I knew that I wanted to go beyond my bachelor's degree. So Dean Glasser at the time was very instrumental in helping me explore different options. And I wound up pursuing a doctor of pharmacy degree down the road at University of Kentucky. So I always joke, I always will be a bear cat, but I added the other cat, the wild cat, going to University of Kentucky. And I had decided that I wanted to focus in pediatrics, something with critical care, cardiology, because I wanted to, again, knew that I needed the fresh challenge, opportunities to pioneer. And as you know, from working in that area, there are really no FDA approved drugs. So I wanted to just be able to challenge myself and be an integral part of the healthcare team in helping patient care. So after I left University of Kentucky, after 2 years, graduated, I did a pharmacy residency at a Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. I was actually the first Black resident they had at that particular hospital. And I really learned a lot there in terms of not the clinical aspects of taking care of that special population in an urban community, but also the administrative aspects. So after I finished the training there, I went back to my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, and I was recruited to set up a pediatric high-risk obstetric pharmacy practice. We have several hospitals in Cleveland. You might be familiar with University Hospital's Rainbow Babies and Children's, but unbeknownst to even me, our county hospital, which had a very large urban population, had a very large intensive care unit, pediatric intensive care unit, and so forth. So I actually helped set up the pharmacy service there, trained pharmacists. I got an appointment with University of Toledo to teach interns and did some publications. Moved up, became over the clinical program there, decentralized services, but wound up being recruited into industry. And I laughed because I said, oh, I'll try this new medical science liaison because it was kind of new. And so I'll try it for 2 years, wound up staying for 25 years at Bristol Myers Squibb, and really have had a very lot of good experience there around product launch readiness, working with top international national key opinion leaders in a variety of products. I work with products you're familiar with, like Plavix and Glucophage. I got to be involved with that. And one of my proudest moments was to get promoted to the executive level of medical science liaison. I was actually the first Black person at BMS to achieve that. And I've also maintained my teaching, including adding in University of Cincinnati, as well, being involved with the curriculum advisory committee and so forth. I also had a chance to be national trainer and be the national trainer for a drug you're familiar with, Eliquis. Apixaban, I was involved with the launch readiness and getting the team ready and working with the headquarters team all 3 indications. So that was a rich experience. So once my youngest child was graduating from high school, I decided I wanted to make another career change, looking for a pioneering role. And that's why I wound up at Biogen. I really like neurosciences, so I have an opportunity to, again, design and help onboard large teams of MSLs and work with headquarters teams around launch readiness and different projects. When I look at my career, the last thing I did do was I just got credentialed as a career coach as well through the International Coaching Federation, and just got appointed to be a national ambassador of a relatively new organization called the Women of Color in Pharma. This was established by some coworkers of mine from BMS because of the paucity of Black and Latino women in pharma. So I was brought on board to be one of the 20 ambassadors there. Looking back at my career, proud to say that I am a lifetime member of the National Pharmaceutical Association, and they acknowledged and honored me with a Chauncey Cooper Award for sustained and distinguished services to the profession of pharmacy in 2014. And then also, of course, University for the Robert D. DeSalvo Distinguished Alumni Award. So back to you, Janae. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vernita, for sharing that, for Dr. Hawkins. Okay, next up we have pharmacist Melka Wallace, who graduated in '82 and is pharmacy director of University of Cincinnati Student Health Services.
Like to say good evening to everyone that's here, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel with these distinguished colleagues who've gone before me and have come after. I found my way to pharmacy probably in high school, but my first exposure to pharmacy came in my neighborhood. I was actually sitting behind the counter with a pharmacist, a white-owned pharmacy in a Black neighborhood. And those are my first observations and first curiosities. But going into high school, I did like science, and the study of science and its impact on the human condition and the environment I found very intriguing. And also, Ruby Hill was inspirational in bringing pharmacy to light, because at that particular time, I was looking more closely at engineering and a career in medicine. And pharmacy wasn't on my radar until Ruby Hill came to our high school and actually gave a talk about what opportunities may exist in pharmacy. Fast forward, after choosing pharmacy, I chose the University of Cincinnati, probably by default, not knowing how much it was going to cost to get this degree, nor how long. I really wasn't familiar with the particulars. After getting to know what it was going to take to get this degree, the University of Cincinnati was the best choice for me. My experience at the University of Cincinnati was, by all practical observations, positive. I think that I look at my experience there from the perspective of youth and not too long removed from the civil rights movement. So I think that the University Cincinnati College of Pharmacy in particular had a climate that demonstrated a certain level of readiness for change at that time. And that contributed to my positive experience there. And SNAFA had been established, and that's where I met Margie there. And she was instrumental in focus and motivation toward reaching the goal of becoming a licensed pharmacist. After graduating from the University of Cincinnati, well, I should say I did extern in hospital pharmacy at Good Samaritan Hospital. Upon graduation, there were no jobs in hospital pharmacy in Cincinnati and practically in the whole state of Ohio. So I found myself being recruited by a retail chain that was on the cusp of introducing EMR to retail pharmacy. So I was part of the rollout team of a particular chain in installing and implementation of the usage of EMR in retail pharmacy, which was quite exciting. Still, hospital pharmacy remained my first love. My first experiences in pharmacy, some were positive, some were negative. Some were negative because of race, some were negative because of gender. The most positive experience actually came from patient interaction, which was the whole purpose of entering the profession in the first place for me. At some point, I was able to return to hospital pharmacy in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked at the Mayfield Hospital, which is now a part of the Cleveland Clinic. Fortunately, when I returned to hospital pharmacy, I was able to work in a hospital where the director of pharmacy was indeed a female and the assistant director was an African American. So I had good examples of leadership where you didn't particularly or wasn't used to seeing it, and shared some of the struggle of the female director and the assistant director, and their struggles were different in different areas. One good thing about that experience, the staff was fairly diverse in terms of culture, in terms of race, in terms of experience and age. So it was a great learning environment, and it was a hospital, even though it wasn't a teaching institution, that required pharmacists to rotate through each pharmacy department within the hospital, and also to contribute to quality assurance projects that were going on and contributed to the DUR efforts of the pharmacy to, create a formulary that suited the needs of the patient, as well as some of the mandates that were budgetary related to the hospital. It was only by chance I wound back up in Cincinnati and reluctantly took a job in the college health environment here at the University of Cincinnati. And I say reluctantly because I had a great fear of feeling stagnated in the profession and not being able to grow. But after 2 or 3 years, I found that I could make an impact in pharmacy, particularly with the early education of young people having their first encounter with the healthcare system independent of their parents. And the environment was also stimulating because I was so close to academia and developments that were in the pipeline that had already happened, various publications that were available that I wouldn't have had access to, perhaps had I been in another environment. So I've been at the University of Cincinnati Student Health Services for 20 plus years, and college health has changed immensely since I first entered into it. It's been rewarding. My interaction with the College of Pharmacy has been positive and rewarding, and I'm just pleased to have had the experience. So that's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. All right. And next we have Dr. Ryan Maribel from the class of 2013, who is a drug information specialist with Eversane. Eversana.
Ryan Maribel.
Hi.
First off, I just wanted to thank Danae for your time, as well as any other students who are on the call. Definitely, this is a great opportunity to learn. I feel like I'm learning a tremendous amount. I'm actually on the panel, so this is awesome. Just to give a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. During high school, my main priority was sports. So my main focus was basketball, and that was going to be it for me. Like, that was my ticket. I had played ball pretty much my whole life since 5 years old, and it was pretty much the main thing that I focused on day in, day out. 2 hours, 3 hours of practicing, it was my main focus. By the time I turned 17, it was like, okay, you're almost an adult, so what are we going to be doing? Like, what are you going to take serious as far as like your career? And I had never really thought about it. one of my teachers, she advised me to do some research because she understood the type of skill set as far as me always wanting to ensure that my team was winning versus me just being the person who had the only success. One of my main priorities was always just helping others and making sure people were in the best position to have success and to win. And for some reason, she mentioned pharmacy. And I don't know why she said that, but I'm so thankful for her for mentioning that. And anytime I get the opportunity, I always let her know how much I appreciate for that, because just out of nowhere, like when you think about what a pharmacist does and what they stand for and how they build relationship with patients and other healthcare providers in their community, it was really relative to my role as a point guard playing basketball. Normally, you wouldn't think those two things have anything to do with each other, but it was really relatable. I had the ability to shadow my first pharmacy. It was a Black-owned pharmacy up in Dayton. It was a father and son team. The son was the boss, and I thought that was just like the most cool thing ever. So after doing that, I just remember like going back home to see my dad, and I just let him know like pharmacy is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to pursue. And even when I think about it, like just right now, it's something that kind of gives me chills because it's like I saw their interaction with each other, and I only shadowed them one day, and I may have only been there about 4 hours, but just seeing their level of interaction, the trust that they had within that community, it was like right in the middle of town, probably one of the worst parts of Dayton, but you couldn't tell like when you were within that pharmacy area because they had everybody's attention. They were able to create just different interventions for their patients' lives. I just thought it was just something that I wanted to pursue. Moving forward, once I got to college, this is something I wanted to pursue, and I did have the opportunity to interview at the University of Cincinnati College of Pharmacy. I got in, which was great. Just from there, it was just a really cool ride. Like I'm only 7 years into my journey. During my College of Pharmacy tenure, I was able to engage and reach out and work with a lot of our professors and leaders within the college. Many of them are on this call, which is pretty cool as well. I'm looking on the participant side there. I got a lot of mentors over there. So if you're hearing my voice, I salute to you guys. Following graduation, I started as a community pharmacist. As I mentioned before, my first experience in pharmacy was in community. So I set out that goal to become a pharmacy manager because I really wanted to experience what that was like. Took on roles of staff pharmacist. I had the opportunity to become a patient care pharmacist where I led the hypertension and diabetes coaching program. I had access to about 45 patients, and we would meet once a month, just creating the most positive interventions and trying to optimize any gaps in care, working on behalf of the patient with their healthcare providers to just make sure that they had what was best needed. We worked on various opportunities, immunizations, ensuring that they had access to their medications. So that was a really great experience. But like I mentioned, I always wanted to be a pharmacy manager. So in 2017, I took on the role as pharmacy manager. It was also a very awesome experience. It's something that I looked forward to, and I was able to accomplish that. And that leads us up to October 1st, 2020, which I have been able to transition into my newest role. I am currently with the Eversana organization, which is a pharmaceutical sciences service organization. We work on behalf of pharmaceutical manufacturer clients, representing them in their overall needs. So my current role, I'll be working with a global biotechnology firm representing a product line on macular degeneration. And I just found that out today. So it's very exciting. In addition to my professional role, I am the incoming president for the National Pharmaceutical Association, and I have my incoming speech in 1 hour to this moment, so at 7:30. So just very excited, extremely thankful for all the mentors that I have on this call, including the panel. I mean, these are the giants that I stand on their shoulders. All the difficulties and the challenges that they had to trudge through and to fight through and overcome basically led me into be able to do what I do best, and that's being a pharmacist and representing within my community. So I always am thankful for them. I'm always thankful for those at the college that gave me an opportunity to do what I do. So thank you.
Thank you for that. All right. And then there should be a slide there saying about going over the pathway and background, which we already touched, so we can move on from there. So the first question, I guess, for tonight is, what advice or experiences can you share related to racial inequities in healthcare? And if you have insight for how this is manifesting in the COVID-19 pandemic. Right. So if any of the panelists have any insight on the first or second question that pops up there.
Are we going to go with the itinerary?
Yeah, you can start, Jerry.
Okay, I see that they had listed me first on the itinerary, so I go first. I haven't worked with the public in some time. I did retire basically in 2012, and I did part-time work on up until just the last few years. So I don't have any idea of how hard it is to be on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I know it must be rough. I appreciate everyone who has withstood all of the difficulties and the changes that are going on, and we hope and pray that this will end in the near future. But I will say this. When I gave my comments at the 2004 awards for being a Distinguished Alumni Awardee, my topic was based on the human being. And I love that phrase, because if you switch it around and add an E to human, it just means being humane. We all have faults, shortcomings, but having a humane attitude can go a long way in life. Don't mistreat unless mistreated. Don't overanalyze everything, because life itself is a mystery. Choose friends wisely. Everyone is not your friend. Share secrets only with those you highly trust. Everyone is not your friend. Keep in mind that a secret is only a secret if one person knows. There will always be good days, and there will always be bad days. Hope that you will have more good days than bad. Be relentless in your goals and never give up. These are not just words made for your practice. These words are for sustaining a life that's deserving. One of my mentors, and he's a pharmacist also, his favorite saying is, "I am not easily defeated." I've used that as an inspiration for decades. And finally, do not be afraid to threaten a lawsuit, especially if you have a good case.
I love that. Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Is Margie on the line that would like to add to that?
Yes, I would. When I read this question, I was thinking about my experience in the past, but I'm sure nowadays probably is not. The situation may be different, but when dealing with racial inequalities in any setting, you have to be true to yourself. I believe you have to speak up. And by acting on it, people who have not dealt with people of color, especially as a professional, can learn. Conversations can take place and things can change. Well, I'm gonna share an incident that happened to me. And when I returned home from Gary, Indiana, I was working, and a cashier came to the window and said that the manager said for me to give her some penicillin. And I just looked at her and just ignored her. And then he came back and asked if I had a problem. And I told him, no, I don't. So he wrote the prescription, filled the prescription, gave it to her, and then he threw it in the trash. So I took it out the trash, and I called my supervisor, and I met him after work. And so I told him what had happened. And he just flat out said, I just don't believe you. But I told him that I'm not going to let anyone jeopardize my license because I really worked very hard to get it. And so I pulled the prescription out and I showed him, and he was shocked by it. But I couldn't help but wonder if I was white, how would it have played out? But the thing about it was that I felt disrespected. Even though I felt that way, I didn't take it as a personal. But because I'm a professional. And I wanted that respect as a professional. And I believe the fact that because I spoke up, I took action, things changed, and they did. I began to get the respect as a professional. He was very helpful to me after then. And I think that helped me be able to do the things I wanted to do. So I'm just saying is that, this may not happen, now or anything. But I'm just saying if something do happen on that side of the, with inequality or whatever, just make sure you speak up because change can happen. That's it. Thank you.
That's awesome, Margie. I'm glad that you did stand up for yourself in that situation. I'm sure it was hard. How about Melka? Do you have anything to add about this question? Melka, are you on the line?
Oh, sorry. I unmute myself. I apologize for that.
No, you're fine.
One thing I'd like to share is that when you go into any environment, which is something I think minorities tend to do anyway, you need to test the waters. Observe your colleagues over a period of time that allows you to interact with them and get to know them to the extent that you can in a work environment. Communicate different ideas and exchange feelings about things that don't arouse emotion or high levels of reaction. So you get a chance to get to know the person as a professional and maybe learn something about them personally. Don't approach a job or a work environment based on rumors. It's not, or information that you get prior to taking a position. Take that information and hold it, but make an evaluation independently on your own. Take care when you do have a situation and you're discussing it with a colleague, be it someone that you work beside or a supervisor. Don't invalidate someone else's experience or reality to more validate your own. And that comes with patience too. I think one of the earliest lessons I learned, which people graduating now may have learned it a lot faster than I did, but one of my first bosses told me that perception is someone else's reality. Regardless of what you thought you said or what you thought you communicated, whatever that patient perceived, whatever your coworker perceived, that's their reality. And it doesn't necessarily coincide with yours. I think when you have feelings where you're uncomfortable, or if you have a grievance or a concern, that you should express your thoughts with clarity and with calm, and present them when they're relevant. Sometimes you have an experience or a moment, and however you choose to categorize it, it's not necessarily relevant to your workplace or to the people that supervise and oversee whatever activity, job, or goal, or what the mission is of the organization. So make sure you check the relevance of anything that you're sharing with your coworkers and with the organization that you work for. Recognize that rules are guidelines and that they inform your professional judgment, but they don't supersede the need to address a patient's needs or your personal convictions about the way you do your work. The practice of healthcare is fluid, but the objectives stay the same. Oftentimes, I hate to say this, but it's said over and over again, be a team player. And being a team player doesn't mean you have to put yourself on mute to things that you have questions about or you have different ideas about. I think being a team player means speaking up and sharing your ideas and bringing concerns to the surface where otherwise they may be overlooked. And I think as a minority, a lot of times you may have an advantage in that we are saturated in a culture, not by choice, just by default. And others aren't saturated in our culture and other cultures, except by being deliberate in becoming more familiar with the culture and exploring it. So don't let that be a weakness, let it be a strength, and allow other people to benefit from that strength. And learn your level of tolerance. As the saying goes, sometimes if you stand for nothing, you'll stand for anything. There may be times where you may have to make a different career choice because of the environment that you work in, and you can't be effective as you want to be or should be as a healthcare professional. And have faith in people. I think Jerry kind of hit a nail on the head. You know, everyone is humane, and you have more in common than you do different. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you for that. How about Dr. Hawkins, Dr. Vernita Hawkins? Are you still there? Would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you, Danae. And wonderful comments by everyone on the call. Definitely resonates with all of us. I wanted to comment from the perspective of industry, because it does affect, pharmaceutical biotech industry, and some things to think about in terms of racial equity and just observations and experience that impact the patients we serve as pharmacists. So I want to take a look at it from external versus internal, and just what I've encouraged you to observe, and you may have seen it in the industry. But it all centers around, like Melka just said, being confident to have courageous conversations and be advocates for a just community, whether it's patients' knowledge we're standing up for, or bringing attention to the lack of, particularly with patients of color, or our healthcare providers giving them the information they need, or internally in terms of talent acquisition, talent development, and so forth. So let's take a look externally. Wanted to bring up the fact that if you look at clinical studies, as we know, there's often a paucity of people of color in studies with various medications. And it brings to mind experience I used to have when I would bring some studies from, one of my employers to urban doctors, and they would look and they would ask me, well, how many Black patients are in there? How many Latino, or how many women? Because that's what I see. And very often it wasn't represented. So that would be feedback I would bring back to the company and ask them, are we planning to provide this information for, our potential customers? And one thing we do have to keep in mind is there may have been a reluctance to get patients because of racial challenges. We all should be familiar with the Tuskegee experiment, where, patients who of color, Black patients in Alabama, were denied therapy that could have helped them, and they wound up having some dire consequences despite the availability of therapy. So patients are aware of these things. It's in the media, it's been on HBO, and as well as Henrietta Lacks as well, having her cells used without compensation. And these are things we still use today in this world. So there's been movies, there's information about that. So having that empathy, bringing these things to our attention, and I have seen companies actually bring in speakers about these issues. The other part is the materials that are used from companies to market products. And if you bring in a been done early on in my career where you had people who do not look like the people that are served in the urban community, you will get pushback. So being able to speak up about that to the company is very important and has happened. On the internal side, you've heard me mention deliberately that purpose that often, I was the first person, few person, whatever. And with that came challenges. I'm not going to lie about that. You can understand to get where I needed to get, but using the skills that Margie and Jerry and Melka so eloquently shared, that's what helped me to endure, along with, again, remembering what Ryan said, standing on the shoulders of many people before me and beside me who helped and encouraged me. And just having that inner confidence that no one can describe or define or devalue you. And one of my favorite quotes is by Eleanor Roosevelt that says, "No one makes you inferior without your consent." So when people would try to project their projections on me due to their misperceptions, I didn't absorb that. So that's something to remember in terms of, dealing with racial equity. You're going to have to how you feel about it. And I remember I had a mentor, I was dealing with a challenge and trying to move up. And I remember her telling me that I needed to think about three things. Was I going to stay and take it? Was I going to stay and fight? Or was I going to leave? And she told me that was going to be an individual decision I had to make. One to take things laying down. So, either I'm going to stay and fight or I'm going to leave if it's going to cost something. But that's something, again, each individual has to decide. And one thing I have seen in corporate America that's different is there are now more accountabilities about how many people they're going to recruit of color. I've seen numbers, I've seen metrics, which I have not seen before. There's also unconscious bias training now, mandatory trainings now for managers that I had not seen before and happy to see. So just want to make you aware of that. And in terms of COVID-19, I just wanted to make a quick comment that we do need data, of course, in people of color. But again, keeping in mind from an empathy perspective, based on what I said about the Tuskegee experiment and all the other things, there may be some apprehension that remains. And you may hear about, even in your settings, from people of color about the upcoming COVID vaccines. So back to you, Danae.
All right, thank you so much for that. And I was glad all the panelists were able to basically stay and fight. But yeah, Dr. Maribel, are you there? You want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great question, and it's pretty loaded. So I'm just going to try to touch on it. I see that there's a piece there offering advice. So I try to give too much advice, but since it's being solicited, I got some advice. Especially for students who even actively practicing pharmacists and those who are teaching our students of pharmacy. So one thing I always recommend is to perform self-assessment and understand like your own implicit biases and unconscious biases that we all just naturally have. Just being able to do that will allow you to identify any gaps that you might impose on other individuals, especially those who are in positions of vulnerability or who may not be able to amplify their voice on a level to where their needs will actually be met. Specifically with regards to racial inequalities in healthcare, there's no question that this is the case, that this happens. It's been going on for hundreds of years. And I think it's very important that as all of us, as healthcare professionals and pharmacists and future pharmacists, that we are aware of these types of racial inequities, specifically in healthcare. So just a few that come to mind. I was typing some notes on my phone, so hopefully no one thought I was texting. But so just a few areas: lack of healthcare provider access. So in medically underserved areas, patients who live in those areas often have a difficult ability to actually go to see a healthcare provider or to access a pharmacy. Or if there are providers in that area, they may not take their insurance. They may have to travel across town. If they have limited transportation, that puts them in a position where their care is not being taken. And if for some reason the powers that be behind the scene aren't acknowledging those things, it could put that person in a very unique position, or in a very stressful position. A few other areas with regards to coronavirus, lack of access to PPE for both patients and healthcare professionals in medically underserved areas. So that puts not only the patient, but also practitioners in those areas at risk of being exposed. So that's another inequity. You've got lack of testing supplies. So if you have patients from various racial backgrounds, they may not have access to have a timely test or a rapid test if there is potential exposure, which it all is because it's airborne. And then there's also a very deep concern for access to vaccines. So we all are aware that vaccine production and the clinical trials are currently underway. But what they don't understand is how those vaccines are going to be distributed specifically in medically underserved areas. So those are areas that are extremely important for us to acknowledge and understand. Like, how can we make sure that there are no gaps or there are no patient populations that are overlooked? Then just a few other areas that I have here as far as racial inequities in healthcare. There's often general stereotypes, specifically with you may have heard or experienced the thought of poor hygiene for certain ethnic groups. One that came about during the coronavirus pandemic, there was a physician and a Ohio senator that asked if people of color were contracting coronavirus because they don't wash their hands. That was a real statement, and you may have heard about it, or there may have even been discussion amongst your personal networks. But those are all things that need to be explored, because that wasn't just an opinion for one person. That physician more than likely has taught and mentored other professionals that have gone on and shared those same opinions just based off of what another person was taught. So just being aware of just different situations along those lines is very important. High pain tolerance, so lack of addressing complaints of pain, that goes all the way back to the days of slavery. So that's important to be aware of as well. Lack of consent, I believe I heard Dr. Hawkins mention the Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cell production line with lack of consent. So there are many different health inequities in the history of our time in healthcare. And I feel like just at present, coronavirus just shed a lot of light on that. But as each of us on this call, we don't have to look at it as just problems. We can come up with solutions, remain self-aware of some of our own biases, and really just try to break those barriers down in order for us to be able to treat our patients on the highest level.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So I have a final question here. It is, how can pharmacists engage in calls to action, communicate intentionally, and practice accountability of self and others to create a just community? And we're going to go the opposite way. So we're going to start again with Dr. Maribel.
That's a great question as well. How can pharmacists engage in calls to action? I'll just speak to our students. I would just say that it's just important just to remain open to opportunity. With me just being 7 years as a practicing pharmacist, I always just try to remain open and available for opportunity. It may not be something that I feel that's directly on my 5-year plan or 2-year plan or 10-year plan, but I really lean on people who I consider mentors, and I trust them for their advice and their guidance. And oftentimes they'll tap you, even if it's in a very informal way, to encourage you to take advantage of an opportunity. But one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to take it for granted and let it pass you by, because it can be that call to action that could take you to the next level within your student career or within your professional career. So just remain open to opportunity, trust your gut, and lean on your mentor base to provide you with those opportunities that you otherwise may not be privy to or have access to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Vernita Hawkins.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, lots has been said already about advice, and two things that came to mind when I think about as a pharmacist, as an individual. What brings out to me is how to communicate intentionally. And as a career coach and I'm just observing, that's a big struggle, and one thing I would invite you to consider is an exercise we did last month during some training I had about diversity and inclusion and how to deal with these tough situations, because it's not easy to have courageous conversations. So what we had to do is put ourselves in the place of a situation that involved some racial inequities. And how would you respond if you were one of these people? If it happened to you directly, if you were a bystander, or if you were a manager? And just remember, you're in different settings as a pharmacist, as a human being, and somewhere just out and out. Let's say something happens. How are you going to react? And how can you prepare yourself? So first, it starts with self-awareness, right? We've heard that. I think all of us have commented about that. We all have our own biases and things. So how can you address that? And often awareness, it happens through education. And as you know, there are so many different ways you can do that, through a book club, through going on the internet. I know we have some wonderful Smithsonians with African American history, Native American, and they have a lot of online resources. I know our employers, for example, we have some wonderful resources we've been sharing with people, so they know how to have the courageous conversations in these different scenarios. The other thing you could do, depending on energy and commitment, is to get involved. You heard many of us talk about SNAFA and NPHA. Or there's also probably different diversity and inclusion types of activities within all the organizations, particularly these days, or different things like the YWCA, opportunities to get involved and grow as an individual and contribute. Because as you know, racism, systemic racism, has been declared a public health crisis, even in the state of Ohio back in June 15th. So it does definitely impact outcomes of patients. And as far as we have a commitment to improve that. So very, very important to educate yourself and decide how you're going to incorporate that in your practice. So back to you, Danae.
All right, awesome. Yeah, there's so many resources out there that we need to be focused in on. How about Melka? Yeah. Are you there, Melka?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
I don't have much to add to what has already been said. So I would just be echoing what Ryan and Vernita have shared. I do want people to realize that sometimes don't eliminate the possibility that you're being perceived as an offender in a situation. So just take care, as Ryan and Vernita have said, self-evaluate your own perspectives, become more learned about your colleagues and the people you serve. And based on what Vernita said, depending on your energy and your courageousness, call attention to overt acts of discrimination without being confrontational. It is so easy and so tempting not to want to do that, particularly in the work environment, because you're not sure of what the reaction is going to be, or if you do know that it may yield unwanted consequence. It leaves you fearful for taking action even when the opportunity presents itself. And again, I'll say, don't mistaken ignorance for unawareness or a different life experience. Some people don't want to learn about other people, whether they be disabled in some way or different religion, different culture, different race. They just don't want to know. Others do want to know, and they may misstep or say something or do something inadvertently without really knowing that they are being offensive to a group of people or in a situation or to you on your job. And when you go to look for opportunity or opportunity presents itself, do your homework if you want to be an active contributor to change. And when I say that, I say evaluate the progressiveness of thought and action of the organization that you're choosing to become a part of or an employee of. So seek information. There are times when you just need a job and you take a job because you need a paycheck. But there are times when you have to make a broader decision in light of how long you're going to be with that organization and what it stands for and what you feel like when you go home from your job, because you spend a lot of hours working for a company or organization. And that's all I have to say. So back to you, Danae.
Alrighty, we can move on to Margie and see if she has anything to add on top of that insight.
I do. I'm coming as a community pharmacist. Since I worked in Gary and especially in the West End for several years, sometimes, well, the community pharmacist sometimes is the only health professional people see. And I was called upon action as far as community issues were concerned and everything, but anyway, I think that when you are called upon, you first listen to whatever the issue is, and you can't take it personal. You keep your biases out of it and just stay focused on the issues at hand. Especially nowadays with immunizations, pharmacists are short-staffed. They can't really participate even if they want to sometimes in the community. But I feel like if you just listen, you might be able to share with someone else in your organization or somebody else that can help with those issues. Regardless what issues are, we have to, like I want to reiterate, that you have to listen, speak out, and take action. That's the only way change is going to be, and we have a just community in our country. I do want to share a quote by Carter G. Woodson. It was one of the classes I took when I was having difficulty in pharmacy school. He wrote a book called Miseducation of the Negro. The differences of races, moreover, is no evidence of superiority or inferiority. This merely indicates that each race has certain gifts which the others do not possess. It is by the development of these gifts that every race must justify its right to exist. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Margie. Jerry, do you want to wrap us up with the question?
I'm going to say that I have heard some great advice, some great comments, and some great teaching skills. And if we could somehow get the word out to somehow incorporate that into a way to encourage the students to use their tools to the best of their ability and seek help when they need it. That's the key to success. All of us need to rely upon one another at one time or another. Mm-hmm. So if we can work as a team, we could get it done.
Yes, of course. We can't do this all on our own. None of us can. All right. Well, that was the final question officially. Thank you guys all for your incredible insight and comments and suggestions during this time. And right now we're going to turn over to Pat Aco, who will offer an update on behalf of the college, and then we will engage in a Q&A with the panelists. So if you have any questions for the panelists, can you please put it in the chat box? Thanks. I think you're muted, Pat.
All right. Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Thank you, Danae. I appreciate this opportunity to provide updates about the college's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the steps that we've taken before and after our meeting that we had with the alumni this summer. And we've done a lot of things based on your feedback and discussion. We've begun to take steps toward intentionality and action. We started with the September 4th communication, and in that update, you will see that we're trying to be more transparent and be held accountable. There you learn that we started a new committee. The committee is the Advocates for Diversity Committee. This committee is responsible for creating a culture of belonging and also increasing topics and activities of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our curriculum. You'll also see there that we've asked for service opportunities. Alumni, we need you. And we want to ask you, we have a pharmacy technician program with high schoolers. And the high schoolers, because of COVID-19, they can't do field trips. So we're looking for our alumni that can do virtual tours or even engage with the students with interviews with Flipgrid and other technology so that the students can learn more about pharmacy other than the classroom. We also had our LGBT diversity committee. They created a brochure. This committee, this brochure is great. And if you want a copy for us to send you copies of the brochure, we want to get that out there so you can share it with your colleagues on how to treat the LGBTQ community. We're glad to say that the College of Pharmacy just received word recently that we are a HEED Award recipient, and that is the Higher Education Excellence in Diversity. It is so nice to be recognized externally for our efforts, but we still realize that we need to make significant investments to be better. We want to continue our dialogue with our alumni, and we want to ask our alumni to mark their calendars for October 28th from 6 to 7. During that meeting, we want to give you the survey results, and we want to continue the dialogue with you. And now I want to hand it back over to Danae for questions and answers for our panelists.
All right. So this first question was actually submitted ahead of time, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one for the panelists. It says, how can pharmacists set themselves apart in a competitive job market and find a position that lines up with personal goals while meeting needs for paying back student loan debt? It's kind of a loaded question, but does any of the panelists have any questions or any insight on that question? How you set yourself apart, how you can meet your personal goals in your job, and how to tackle that student loan debt?
I can lead off on this one as one who has his fair share of student loans and in the middle of a very competitive work environment. I guess I'll just lean back on a few of the statements that I mentioned before as far as like just really aligning yourself like with great organizations. As a student, you're already a part of like a pretty awesome institution with the University of Cincinnati College of Pharmacy. So you've got one springboard to jump off of right there. After that, if you have people in your life, whether it's your preceptor that you work with, if you work in a pharmacy or if you work within a hospital system, ensure that you have a strong rapport with the person that you report to, because that person is going to be able to advocate for you moving forward, especially if you're going to be out on the market, whether it's through the residency process. You'll want them to be able to write a very strong letter of recommendation on your behalf with meaningful points that can help set you apart for that residency director that might be reviewing your profile. If you're going right into the job market, in addition to having a strong mentor, if you are working or you just want to utilize the information from your rotations, you want to be able to describe specific projects that you may have worked on and to be able to explain exactly what took place. So what you did, what happened, and what the true result was from that. With that information, you can craft your story by multiple different interactions, multiple projects. You can craft a story and you can utilize that to try to set yourself apart within a competitive environment. I'm trying to think if was there anything else to the statement or to the question. I think that I think that covered it.
Okay, perfect. Does anyone else want to add to that question, or should I just go through the next ones?
This is Vernita. Just really quickly, I also wanted to add, again, be true to yourself. Think about what gets you up and excited about projects and what you like to do. I think you heard me say I like to pioneer things. I always had since I was a child. So every position I've had, I've been able to use pioneer, create, and so forth. And then look at market trends. So we have LinkedIn now. That wasn't a tool we had when I was coming up, and I use it a lot. And I kind of look at what other people are doing, follow companies, follow posts. Think about what you like, for example, and what the need is. For example, tying it into racial and ethnic, we have a growing Latina community. So if you can speak Spanish, I mean, my goodness, you can do lots of things, work for, I've seen, for example, some of our medical liaisons who can speak Spanish, they place them in some very nice areas like Florida and so forth. They specifically look for that. They might even get paid more. If you like computers, everything's going digital. A lot of things in telemedicine and so forth. So if you've got that kind of skill, that's one thing. Financial planning. So look at market trends, find a way to find that, and then pulse check it against your interests, and then join organizations too, organizations outside of pharmacy, maybe general healthcare organizations where you can network with people.
All right. I actually have a couple questions in the chat, unless someone really needs to add something to that question.
I just want to add just something quick as far as what she was saying about the financial plan. And I was just going to say, if you inquire about jobs early, just in case you do have to do certain things in order to get that job. And also have a plan, because you have to be aware that you're going to have to make sacrifices in order to pay that debt back. You cannot buy your Tesla your first year out of school. You have to really look at that and just be patient and stay constant in whatever you decide to do.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next question we got from the chat. It's from Dan Acosta, and it says, as a minority or non-minority health professional, how do you respond to a person who is overtly making discriminatory or racist comments?
There should be somebody in authority if it's in the workplace. I would recommend, talking to their superior and seeing if they can rectify the problem. If they can't, you may just have to find a way to get around it. But you're going to have experiences like that. I assure some of our minority students. It's going to be how thick is your skin and how you want to pursue it, and that's an individual thing. It's hard to answer that on my side.
This is Vernita. I think, go ahead. Is anybody else? Yeah, I was just going to say you have to make them aware with their awareness. Like, for example, you can ask them questions. Do you realize what you are saying is offensive, whatever it is? Because just to start with that first, and then depending on what kind of response you get and what's setting you in, then take it to where you need to, or maybe you have to do that and report it. But definitely, to me, I think it starts with making them aware of what their behaviors are doing and how it comes across first, and giving them the opportunity to correct whatever it is they need to do. And then you can decide how far you want to take it from there.
I just want to reemphasize, this is Melka speaking. I agree with Vernita and Jerry, but as tempting as it is to not want to say anything, you should say something, and decide how you proceed after you've said something. I don't think you should, depending on if it's a patient versus your supervisor versus a colleague, will determine how you proceed with the particular situation, because each one is handled differently in my mind.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I agree with Melka. I just wanted to say that when I train people or myself, when I was learning, I learned not to take things personal. You have to remain a professional yourself. It could be a teaching moment for them. I would just say, just keep your cool and definitely speak up, because maybe it'd be a teaching, like I said, a teaching moment for them.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move into, I feel like this might be our final question for the night, but it's coming from Diamond Donaldson, who I believe is the SNAFA pres-elect for UC. I didn't want to get that wrong, but I think she is. And she said, thank you to the panelists and coordinators of the event. As a current student, I can say that your participation in this discussion is so encouraging. She asked, have you ever felt that you were underpaid due to your race or gender? If so, how do you advocate for yourself?
Good boy. I'm laughing because I remember when I worked down at Land Street, the way Walgreens decided about bonuses, it was a formula, and the floater bonus was higher than my bonus as a pharmacy manager, and I just felt that wasn't right as far as the way they did that according to the number of prescriptions, because but anyway, I remember complaining about that, but eventually they changed it. But that is so funny to say, but it does happen, and you do have to speak up. Yeah.
And this is Vernita. I would say how that's been handled is you can ask HR for a salary review. And you can do it, that starts off with a very 2 to 3 sentence email letter, and just kind of say, oh, I've been here, blah, blah, blah. You don't accuse them or anything, because some of it you fell through the cracks or whatever, and it may not be race or gender based. But the first step is to ask HR, and they can do this. You don't need anybody's permission. You can request a salary review and then see what happens from there.
After you request a salary review, and if you don't get the results that you think you should have gotten, be prepared to do your own salary comparisons, verify and provide documentation of what the salaries are for the job you're doing, and have in hand or close at hand your reviews and why you would deserve a raise or whatever, or why you feel you have not received increases, fairly. But don't let them do all the work. Have verification, do your research, and have your own information about your performance available so that you can use that to substantiate your request.
That's good. That is actually an excellent second step.
All right. Well, does anyone else have anything to add to that specific question? All right. In the interest of time, we are going to end our discussion today. If you asked a question in the chat, but it was not addressed, Bree Hawkins with the UC Alumni Association will follow up with you individually with answers from our panelists. We appreciate all of the panelists for coming and giving us their time and sharing all their stories and insight this evening. And thank you everyone for attending. We all appreciate it. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Being back, how's it going? What's up?
Hey, congratulations on your big day there, Ryan.
Yeah, it's been a busy day, and it's about to get busier.
I didn't realize today was your big day. So man, that's we're really proud of you, and I just wish it's too bad we can't be in New Orleans, you know, in person to see this happen.
Yeah,
All right.
it's definitely a difficult time, but we'll work. You know, I come from a good at UC, so you know we can improvise in difficult times.
All right.
That's right. And good job, Danae. Thank you. Great moderation. And thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure. And hi, Dean Mack. How are you?
Hi.
Fantastic job, everyone. Yeah, and Danae, I just echo that. So
Yeah.
what a wonderful job you did tonight. So
Thank you so much.
I agree.
Do you need anything else from me, Bree?
And you're great. Thank you so much. You were awesome at keeping it moving and everything. Yeah.
No, you're completely fine. Thank you so much for letting me do this. All right. Well, I'm gonna go study on like the 10 other assessments I have going. So
Oh my gosh.
wish me luck. Thank you.
We wish you luck. You got it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, guys.